Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special webcast, CSR Measurement Impact, what to measure, how to get started, and how to celebrate your results. This webcast is made possible with the generous support of True Impact. I'm Jeff Hoffman, Institute Leader of Corporate Citizenship and Philanthropy at the Conference Board ESG Center. The Conference Board is the world's leading independent nonprofit think tank dedicated to serving business and society for over a century. At the ESG Center, we focus on corporate governance, sustainability, and corporate citizenship. Today, we are going to discuss the always timely topic of measuring impact in corporate citizenship and philanthropy. As the saying goes, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. As we are entering an economic downturn, it is becoming increasingly important for corporate citizenship executives to not only measure, but to maximize and report the effectiveness of their philanthropic efforts. Today, our guest speakers are going to lead us through some great material. We're going to cover a brief history of CSR impact measurement, 4 CSR metrics you should be measuring, how to communicate your impact, how the PepsiCo Foundation applies these principles and communicates impact with internal and external audiences. Before we get underway, I have a few housekeeping notes to cover. First, at the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets that you can use to interact with the webcast. We welcome audience participation in today's session. You can ask questions in the Q&A widget. We will work them into the conversation as time permits. The slide deck with additional resources is available in the Available Resources widget on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. You can share this program with your colleagues after the fact. It will be viewable on demand in a couple of days. Second, participants in this webcast may earn CPE credit. Follow simple instructions on the slide. Click where it says CEU request in the widget down there. So sign up for credit. Stay online for the entire webcast. Click OK for the 3 pop-ups that occur during the program. The credit is only available for participation in today's live webcast. Please complete the evaluation form at the end of today's session, as we want to incorporate your feedback into future webcasts. Okay. So let's move forward. I am so delighted to be joined by our 2 presenters today. Sadie Miller is Director of Client Success at True Impact, and Meredith Shull is Impact Measurement and Evaluation Manager at PepsiCo. Sadie and Meredith have a lot of great slides to get through. We'll answer as many questions as we can that come in through the chat, and we'll also have a few minutes at the end for discussion. So without further ado, Sadie and Meredith.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm Sadie. I've worked with CSR teams for more than a decade to measure their impact of social investments. And some of you also may be familiar with our work at True Impact with Points of Light, implementing the Civic 50 initiative. That's how Jeff and I got to know each other. I'm based in Massachusetts, but our company lives and works globally. Meredith?
Thank you, Sadie. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I just recently joined the PepsiCo Foundation team. Very recently, I've been working the past nearly a decade in Mexico. So I just moved to Plano, Texas. But I've been working basically, almost past 8 years in social impact evaluation in nonprofit and private sectors.
Thanks, Meredith. All right, so let's start with a brief history of CSR impact measurement. Here's a recent statement from a Fortune 500 CSR program. Equity, diversity, and inclusion are a part of our core values. We've committed more than $30 million to address racial equity and social justice in the United States. This is great, right? it's good to see attention and resources dedicated for an important cause. So what's wrong with it? Well, the problem is intent, not impact. We were recently talking to someone in a different CSR program, and they told us that they had invested $100 million in education, but they just didn't know what came of it. Can you imagine any other department reporting on spending $100 million and having no reportable results? So not knowing your impact leaves you vulnerable to challenging questions from leadership, the board, or the public. If companies are not taking proactive steps now to answer these types of questions, then you might be left scrambling to generate information from proposals or cull through individual organization reports. And right now, impact measurement can look like that, a bit of a scramble and burdensome on your team and your partners. And that's why it's no longer optional to know your program outcomes. So if you look at this and you think that your CSR impact measurement may not be where you think it should be, you're not alone. Here are some of the ways that you and so many others in the field are struggling. So the first challenge for companies who are developing philanthropic measurement strategies is focusing on the wrong data, measuring what's easy, like donation amounts, not what's important, like the resulting community change. And second, using the wrong format. Data that can't be aggregated can't be communicated. Then finally, using the wrong process. I've seen some of the most progressive and data-driven foundations run their nonprofit partners ragged with complex measurement and evaluation processes. Individualized, continuously updated Excel files really were starting to take away crucial implementation time from pastors and volunteer board leaders who are trying to do good in their communities. And all of this leaves you with measurement for measurement's sake, unusable data that isn't actionable. So when we get this right, you get needed insights to prove and grow your program, and your nonprofit partners aren't burdened. In fact, their good work is amplified, and they can use impact reporting to leverage additional funding. So, when done right, impact measurement can lead to an increased sense of purpose, increased credibility, and can help you share the work of your partners by demonstrating their value. All of this should lead to improvement for you and your nonprofit partners. And by the end of this presentation, you'll have a framework to do exactly this. So to start with that framework, let's go over the 4 things you should be measuring to guide your impact investing and strengthening your reporting approach. For KPI 1, we'll talk about how to best capture impact. That is, how do you track outcomes and not just outputs? For KPI 2, we'll talk about alignment and how to track your investments and how they align with your priorities. For KPI 3, we'll discuss social return on investment, or SROI, we use the terms interchangeably, and how to track the productivity of your investments. And finally, we'll talk about data quality and how to track the quality of the data behind the impacts. So first, let's talk about moving from inputs and outputs to outcomes. And I want to really quickly define these 3 terms. Inputs are the resources that are necessary to run a program or engage your beneficiaries. Outputs are the goods or services that are delivered by a program, and outcomes are the program, how the program actually improves lives or improves society. So let's pause and play a game. The system has this really smart poll tool. And so if everyone could engage in the poll questions as they pop up, I'm curious how this group might categorize a few examples of data that you would gather from your nonprofit partners. And we'll run this poll so that you can categorize each option as an input, an output, or an outcome. Let's take a few seconds for you to take a look. All right, so is the following metric an input, output, or outcome? $35,000 were donated in emergency COVID relief. And you can select input, output, or outcome. I see people answering. Oh, this is so much fun. All right. I'm gonna click next. Oh, nice. Okay. So here, 71% that said that this was an input, 23% output, and almost 5% outcome. Let's go for number 2. Is the following metric an input, output, or outcome? 5,000 smallholder farms improve agricultural techniques. I'm seeing the results rolling in. I'm going to take one more second. Okay, I'm calling it. All right, so here we have, no one said this was an input. 42% said output, and 58% said outcome. So we're a little bit split on whether this is an output or an outcome. And then here, is this an input, output, or outcome? A new endowed scholarship is funded. Input, output, or outcome? All right, I'm seeing a lot of answers. I am gonna call it, and so here we're really pretty split between all three. Most say that this is an input. A little fewer, 38% say output, 21% say outcome. And then the last question, 72 students receive healthy snacks and learn better eating habits. Input, output, or outcome? Oh, we're getting there. Just a few more seconds. All right, and okay, so outcome wins with 80%, followed by output and input. So interesting. Okay, so we played a trick on you. None of these data that we shared were outcomes. You can see here in the green, the data points play a critical role in generating an impact, but none represented the actual impact or outcome of these projects. So in the case of donating emergency COVID relief, this would be categorized as an input. Smallholder farmers improving agricultural techniques is an output. A new endowment scholarship funded input, and 72 students receiving healthy snacks, learning to better eating habits, that's still an output. And most companies would really agree that outcomes are more meaningful than outputs. It's more meaningful to track and to report on the number of people that protect their health, improve their livelihood, graduate from school, or improve their food security. So the challenge is understanding the difference between outputs and outcomes, and then collecting the right information for your partners. What I like to think of here, because when we show this, it's like, oh, we need to ask our partners all of these things. And I think about Marie Kondo, that you don't have to see many, many kinds of value in that old pair of sneakers when you're picking it up and trying to understand, I liked these so much, they're a little bit worn, but maybe I could use them again in a different season. This is a really simple question. Does this spark joy? And that helps define whether you keep that pair of sneakers or not. And in the case of metrics and what to collect, because we're thinking about the balance between the most meaningful things to collect and the least burdensome things for your partners to develop a really strong and trusting relationship is, oh, well, if it's not an outcome, we can take it off the table. We don't have to ask procedural questions and have them continuously track those. And that's how you can stay laser focused on the end outcome of work when you're trying to determine and communicate the actual impact of philanthropy. So, how do we do it? We often break down the steps along the way into this super simple logic model with 4 stages, starting with reach. Reach is the stage in which people are engaged or receive services. So this is about kids who enroll in the nutritious eating class. And then learn is the stage where people gain skills or motivation or knowledge. So kids actually learn the where corn grows, and they learn about nutrition. And then act is where people do something with their learning. Kids start to eat more fruits and vegetables, and that end stage is succeed. So this is where kids are eating healthier and have gained food security as a result of this program. And by breaking them down by each stage, organizations are able to more clearly define the steps along the way to the ultimate impact of their program. And it helps differentiate outputs from ultimate outcomes. So to put a real world example on this, I want to bring Meredith in to talk through PepsiCo's Community College Scholarship Program.
Thank you, Sadie. So the Uplift Scholarship Program provides scholarships and supportive services for Black and Latino community college students so they can complete their education and secure living wage employment. So this program provides clear examples of inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Starting with REACH, the inputs refer to the number of community college award scholars, who then gain skills and motivation through counseling, advising, and career resources. These are our outputs. The scholars then go on to complete their certification or degree and gain employment, which is ultimately the outcome that reflects the impact made in their lives.
Awesome. So now that you have the program's impact, the next step is to calculate your claim of impact as a funder. Often funders burden their nonprofits by asking them to identify the specific impacts brought about by their specific donation. Instead, we take a kind of different approach for this calculation. So ask your partners to tell you about the full program that your donation supported, and then calculate the appropriate portion of their impacts. And we're going to just look at a really simple example to understand this. Perfect. Okay, so at the top, you can see that this program impacted 8 people's lives. And the most common claim formula is what's known as a contribution claim. So let's say PepsiCo funded 50% of this overall program. In this example, they can claim 50% of that impact. So the funder claims 50% for 4 people. But then there's another type of claim that can yield you higher impact numbers, and it's called catalytic claim. When your claim is foundational to the growth of a program, you can claim additional impacts beyond what you funded. So here are the cases that's relevant to use a catalytic claim. You activated additional dollars through a challenge fund to match dollars donated, something that PepsiCo has absolutely done. You established an endowed scholarship fund, which will have sustained impacts over time, which is, again, PepsiCo is a great example of this in their investment with Kiva and some of their investments in scholarship funds. And then you work with a nonprofit or an innovative program model that's replicated in other organizations or regions, like a cooperative recycling business or a safe water access model. I have no idea who does those things. And then one of my favorites, if I can choose favorite, I probably can't, of PepsiCo's own social enterprise, which is Food for Good. And Food for Good is one of those activating additional donors. In this case, they're activating government funds to fund community feeding programs, where by leveraging not the food that they produce, but by their know-how from producing that food. So all of the supply chain knowledge, transportation and logistics knowledge, PepsiCo's Food for Good is applying to providing afternoon, summer, community snack meal programs for kids. So once you've determined your overall claim of impacts, you can share that impact with stakeholders by highlighting the amount of funding invested in your social cause priorities. We don't throw this stuff away, but it's really just, you're checking the box. We did make this investment. The number of people reached due to your investments, a key step along the way to the ultimate social impact, and then the number of people who experience social impacts due to that investment. You can also share high-level descriptions of impacts, such as improving food security, income, housing, and school performance. And these are now kind of ready to map onto priority communities or as contributions to sustainable development goals if you've made that kind of commitment.
So if we look at the case study of the PepsiCo Foundation Safe Water Access, we see that by tracking our outputs over time, we're able to measure and monitor data and, if necessary, course correct in order to meet our foundation impact targets. So over the last 15 years, PepsiCo and the PepsiCo Foundation have helped more than 68 million people gain access to safe water through distribution, purification, and conservation programs. And this actually puts us 2/3 of the way towards our goal of providing access to safe water for 100 million people by 2030. And one of the key components of reaching this goal is through catalytic partnerships. So when we consider the catalytic claims, as Sadie has described, we find that by having invested more than $55 million in safe water access programs, the PepsiCo Foundation has been able to amplify our impact by leveraging approximately $740 million in additional funding from other donors. So it just provides a really clear example, I think, of this monitoring the data over time, as well as this catalytic claim that we just heard.
All right.
So
let's talk about alignment. Oh.
If I could jump in a second. In fact, Meredith, that was so interesting about the catalytic and how your investment in water and what was really generated of that. And I think that's something that oftentimes we don't think about in philanthropy, because oftentimes we are the catalyst. And even when you're talking about, food for good, so much of the time, corporate philanthropy will take a risk and try something which creates proof of concept that then the government sometimes can actually then go through and scale. So all really fascinating. Sadie, comment for you that came in the Q&A box, which I think is really, really interesting. And this is from Rita, and it has to do with, could input-output outcome be different based on what the program design and motivation is? And her comment was, for example, if $35,000 for COVID relief was raised through employee contributions, it might have been an output. And even though that's what I'm saying, but in my mind, I'm thinking it's like, okay, that's interesting, because if your motivation was to engage employees, so it could be different. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, additional funds raised through engagement is an outcome in some instances, in addition to the positive outcomes created through an engagement program. What I would push to think about is, are employees really the end beneficiary here? I don't think that employees would consider themselves as the end beneficiary of a COVID relief program unless they were donating funds while being vaccinated or while implementing other behaviors that protects their own health. If it is a health program for employees, then I would sort of give them that as the $35,000 is a bonus outcome. But then I would likely I do this. This is what I'm going to do when I get off this call, is I'm going to push nonprofits to say, okay, but what happened to those funds? Were you able to use those funds to reach more people that improved their health?
I don't know if I could jump in here as well and sort of, adding to what Sadie is saying. I think that I've seen in a lot of companies is that they have sometimes divided their programs into programs that do look for outcomes, are looking for that impact, and have defined it from the beginning. So this program is going to get to the end beneficiary and we want to reflect the impact in their lives. But there is sometimes a small percentage, usually it's a smaller percentage of programs that may not necessarily be trying to get to an outcome level. And I think that's okay, that there are certain programs that might not be designed to get to the outcome level. And then I think it's up to each company to sort of decide what percentage that could be of their investments. But I think that they should all be pushed towards looking at the programs and see what impacts are being generated, even if it's not the intention at the onset of the program.
Yeah, we're getting, this is a very thought-provoking conversation. Rita chimed back in that she agrees. That's why I said output and not outcome. So very good. We have two other questions on this section. So let me jump in quickly. One, this is from Jason. Can you give an example of how an annual scholarship can be adjusted to become a catalytic partnership?
Called an endowment. It is this funny thing that whenever I think about like my own cash-strapped public school, I think, why don't they endow teachers? Like, that's something that private schools have really figured out. Endowments give catalytic impacts.
Yeah. All right. And then we have Emma, who has two things that have popped up. One is, do we have to be very careful with how we phrase catalytic impact in your reporting? Is there a higher level of risk being audited or challenged on your claims? Which is interesting because we talk so much about assurance these days. What if your nonprofit partner doesn't currently attribute your impact in this way, but technically your contributions have been catalytic, so you'd like to start having that conversation with them?
Meredith, do you want me to take this one? All right. So number one, we're asking the nonprofit partner about catalytic impacts. But in the case of PepsiCo, that conversation begins in the application. And so thinking about how the relationship may be catalyzing additional donors or funding or be a replicable model is something that you can start having in really early on in the proposal stage of projects. What was the first question? That was a long one.
No, okay, let me scroll back as I've got another one for you. Okay. Do you have to be careful with how you phrase catalytic impact in your report?
Yes. Yes. This is a great one. So I would say with the PepsiCo Foundation as an example, they've always been really explicit about direct funding and catalytic impacts, and so having using a contribution calculation and understanding the difference between your funding and catalytic impacts is really valuable, and being explicit about it has certainly worked for the foundation, which does have external validated data.
And here is one more question, then I know we need to move on, but this is such an important one that I think we all need to think about. And the question is, from my experience, asking NGOs to provide you with outcome-level information can require additional funding. Often it's M&E that's more intensive. Can you speak to what's an appropriate level or percentage of your funding that should go towards this, to providing the additional impact? We know our nonprofit partners work so hard to actually do what we want them to do. We do know sometimes it's a burden to give us this extra data.
I can start answering, Sadie, and then you can feel free to jump in. I'm not sure if I would put a specific percentage on that. However, I do think it is important to have those, to be clear from the beginning and have those conversations with the partner towards the beginning of the program to understand what is possible for them and how can we best support them. How can we make our process as least complicated for them as possible. And I think that just comes with that relationship that you build with partners from the beginning. I think that can really help clarify expectations from the beginning and even design it into the program so that it's not an additional thing that comes up later, that further down, oh, we also want these outcomes. And then it's harder to find that data when you haven't been collecting it from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this may have changed with inflation and lots of other things. From my academic experience, we always said 10%, like 10% of any grant budget was for evaluation, but we're also going to talk through in our data quality section the concept of best available data and how to work with partners to get to outcomes, and then ask them to be very explicit about the source of that, which I think can be very valuable with programs that don't have resources to provide that evaluation quality.
Okay, good. All right, back to you.
Yes, everything that Meredith said.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thank you both.
Oh, yeah. So let's talk just for a little bit about alignment and how to track the different ways that investments can align to your goals. And, we face so many challenges across the globe, and it can be overwhelming to narrow down which issues or communities should be elevated and supported through philanthropy. So to focus on an alignment strategy, we recommend using 3 questions: who, what, and where. For example, you could organize your funding pillars around who will be impacted by focusing your investments on partnerships that engage with a priority demographic group, or you could organize investments by where they will have an impact, including priority markets or regions or operating sites, and then the what or cause. So what cause area is most critical to your community, and what cause area do you have the skills and capabilities to support? Again, thinking through, why does Food for Good make so much sense for PepsiCo? It's really about leveraging their skills and capabilities. And many companies use a combination of all 3, which PepsiCo has also done.
Yes. So here are some of the different alignments that we have across the foundation that sort of guide our initiatives to be as strategic as possible. So regarding demographics, some of our priority cohorts include female farmers that we reach through programs like CARE, She Feeds the World, Black and Hispanic small business owners who participate in programs such as Allies for Community Business, Impacto, Hispanic Business Accelerator, and the National Urban Lane, which is the Black Restaurant Accelerator, and school-age children, who we prioritize through school meal programs in countries around the world, including in the U.S. through the Food for Good, our own social enterprise that Sadie mentioned earlier, that delivers nutritious meals daily for kids in various learning environments. We also, in the foundation, have 3 defined causes or focus areas that align directly with the business and some of the most critical issues facing the communities in which we operate. So that's safe water access, food security, and economic opportunity. And then finally, our initiatives, as well as the business, operate in these 5 regions: Latin America, Europe, North America, Africa, Middle East, and South Asia, as well as Asia Pacific.
All right. So alignment allows you to review investments and impacts by your priority, who, what, where, and then consider the efficacy of your partnerships within those categories. So in the example I'm showing you now, you might have a hard time identifying which partners are the most effective in supporting your goals. All programs seem to serve key demographics, address key cause areas, or impact specific priority markets. However, after identifying what alignment strategies matter most to your company, in this case, just the who and the what, it's clear that program B and C will serve your goals. So what we're doing here is thinking about an investment, a set of investment priorities within an investment portfolio. What makes a healthy portfolio is those that sort of build and diversify on your priorities. And I think that this is just a great example from the foundation.
Yes, exactly. So this is an interesting case study that sort of looks at a priority regions for us, as well as priority cohorts within a focus area. So if we look here at the map, we have through the hatchery, Chicago, 75 women have been able to earn ServSafe food handler and manager certificates that they need in order to support their businesses. In Australia, we had 131 Indigenous female students complete year 12 education and then transition to work and further study through a partnership with the STARS Foundation. We had 1,000 plus female scholars were reached through the PepsiCo Amal collaboration on youth in Pakistan. And then finally, through the She Feeds the World program, over 400,000 women across Egypt, Peru, and Uganda were able to receive sustainable agricultural training.
All right. And, you know, that's just such a great example of you don't have to have a either or. You know, there's a regional commitment, a commitment to economic opportunity, and then a lens for empowering women on top of that. I just think it's great. So the third KPI, Jeff, get ready for some questions, is social return on investment. And this takes the first KPI of impact, and then with a simple calculation enables you to understand what outcomes are driving the most social value. And so our goal in doing good is to do the most good with what we have. And that's why we calculate SROI, or social return on investment, so we can determine how efficiently our investments generate positive social outcomes. And to calculate this, you take the total outcomes of a program, divide them by the total program cost, then multiply it by 10K, just so you can get an easy number that shows how much value each program creates per $10,000. And the example on the right is where a program houses 250 people. It costs $1 million to implement. You divide those, and then you multiply them by $10,000 to get 2.5 people housed per $10,000 invested. Sort of as from a policy perspective, we call this like a cost benefit analysis, or from a business perspective, just say cost per outcome. So SROI calculations really allow for a simple and powerful analysis to guide investments and identify best practices. One might think, using the example that I show here, that it would be easy as stack ranking different programs and giving more resources to the one with the highest SROI. In this case, it would be the supplies program. However, this assumes an apples-to-apples comparability, which won't always be the case in case it rarely is. So taking a closer look at the impacts of the 5 educational programs, we see that the SROI calculations are not comparable because the levels of impact are not identical. To say this another way, what counts as success is different between these programs, even though they're working towards similar educational outcomes. So we encourage you to use contextual SROI, comparing programs with common outcomes and definitions of success to each other. The supplies program offers a lower impact solution than the higher graduation program. And because both the graduation and career development programs have a high level of impact, then I can apply the calculation to invest a higher SROI program. So I would be investing in the graduation program, which has the highest SROI for the level of impact that we're looking for. And now we're going to say some things about SROI and not using it for evil, but I believe in the value of SROI. I believe that it's an antidote to our addiction to investing in individual behavior change models and just like a chronic neglect of systems and policy change. There are ways that funds can be amplified for good in a really powerful way. And SROI, once you start looking at those calculations, can be just mind-blowing in seeing the difference between, highly intensive, sort of people-focused and policies and system change work. But keep a few things in mind when you implement this approach. Using SROI to shine a light on what is working and then investigating opportunities to improve but not punish. So those high-touch programs like funding someone through college for 4 years is life-changing. It's also very expensive. How do you think about creating a healthy investment portfolio that may include some high intensity people investments with other systems, curriculum, infrastructure changes that have higher SROI? Second, context is key. So always keep in mind that who, what, and where questions when comparing SROIs. In the evaluation world, we call supporting people who are sort of guaranteed success creaming, because you're sort of taking the cream, not the whole milk. And oftentimes part of your commitment to a community or a group of people is because there's been historical limiting of access to resources. And so that's going to be preventing 100% success in some cases. And that's where sometimes you're investing in a lower SRI program, and that's okay, because it's really matching up with some of your commitments to communities. Looking for outliers, high and low, can also be very helpful because sometimes outliers reveal something that could be off. If something doesn't look right, we often just look into the data quality to see if there are some measurement differences that we can identify. And then finally, you're just not buying a TV. It's not as easy as looking at the star rating on Yelp, but SROI can help group tiers of programs, and using that on top of the other lenses you use sometimes kind of sort of like shakes the decision and helps you see this other component of high impact programs. All right, anything come in?
I think you were clear. You were so clear. So no questions. Yeah, but I love flashlight and not a hammer. You aren't buying a TV. That is my takeaway from this section. So back to you.
Good. Yeah. Okay. And I just mentioned data quality as part of that SROI conversation, and we can dive a little bit more deeply into this to understand it. So data quality is primarily based on the type of evidence that's used to determine impact. Results with lower data quality are sometimes based on speculation, logical assumptions, and we classify these as not evidence-based. And then there's evidence-based data, which includes tracking and estimations based on sampling, pilot surveys, previous results, and external studies. In order to make measurement accessible and affordable for your partners, we do encourage you to count estimates as an important first step in measurement, that this is the kind of evidence that many kind of small programs or pilot emerging innovative programs start with before they can get to that direct measurement. So here we have an example where we combine the SROI and the data quality to make some recommendations for which programs to invest in. Program A has the highest SROI, which is great, but it's not based on high quality data. So it may be better to go with program B, a slightly lower SROI, but the high quality data gives you that confidence in the results. Okay, so we've gone through 4 different KPIs, and we're going to put it all together to consider how these will give you the information you need to make the most impactful investments in the issues and communities that matter to you. So first, we add up the impact and the SROI. Program A here is the highest. So with this, you would say, okay, program A is where we want to invest the most. But then we look at the level of impact for each program. Program C is the only one with the high level of impact. Think of that as, housing, improving income, graduation. And then we have alignment. So A, B, C, all aligned. D is not, and it has a low SROI. So we may want to sort of explore whether that program is really connecting with our kind of program goals. And then when we investigate data quality, we see that B and C are based on high quality data. So putting all of this together, we see a series of recommended next steps for each of the programs. Having this data isn't just about celebrating and doubling down on investing in the highest performing organizations, giving them more funding. It's about raising up the programs that could use more help. This is what grant managers are for. And I think I see this every day with the clients that I work with. It's the program officers, relationship managers, grant managers, whatever you call them, that is a real live phone that they are picking up and asking deeper questions, because there's a reason that they're in the portfolio, but it may be worth bringing them along, adding some additional technical assistance so that you can really have assurance that your funding is going to make the impact that you want it to.
Awesome. Thanks, Sadie. Okay, so now that we have all these great metrics, how can we share them both internally and externally to maximize awareness of your program's results? So let's dive a little bit deeper into that question. And so I wanted to start with this saying, because impact metrics give you half of the communications equation. Your results are best used to provide scale to the stories of how you're helping people, which can be impactful on a much more personal level. So you helped Jane and her family get access to long-term housing. That's wonderful, but it's even better when you can say that you helped 1,000 families do that same thing. So now that we have these results, how can we share them? So we're going to go through 4 steps. The first step is establish goals and metrics. At the PepsiCo Foundation, we have consolidated our goals and foundation, or our foundation goals and targets, into our 3 focus areas: water, food security, and economic opportunity. Then these provide guidance as we collect and monitor data from our partners and programs. The next step is measure your impact. So once we have our goals and targets clear, we invite our programmatic partners to the sort of social impact measurement process. When we distribute then the funds, we ask our partners to create sort of a social impact forecast to capture their anticipated outcomes. And then they update those forecasts with final results once the project is completed. So as we talked about before, keeping things clear and consistent from the start of the partnerships makes it easier for grant makers to communicate about reporting, and for the many stakeholders implementing and reporting on a project to communicate internally. So there is, this bravery in setting and then being clear about your goals with those who will make them happen. Step 3 is determine audience and appropriate context. So now that we have years of continuously collected social impact data, the data requests can be pulled by grant managers or leadership and crafted to the audience and the context as needed. And then the last step is distribute impact data. When we distribute results, we often include narratives from the communities to add depth and humanity to our data. So just remember how we started this section: no stories without numbers and no numbers without stories. And now that we've gotten better at communicating our impact, we're beginning to face a new problem, but this is a good problem. It's a good problem to have. The more we move away from reporting inputs and outputs, such as dollars spent, to actual impact, the hungrier leadership becomes for this kind of information. So when leadership hears the story about how a few women in a small community in Ethiopia were able to save themselves hours of their day, transforming their lifestyle by having safer and closer water access, leadership wants to know how that transformation looks across all their programs, not just in these few women in this small community. So because of the usefulness of impact data we've been collecting at the foundation, we're currently exploring how to sort of broaden the scope of data collection from our partners in order to include these types of valuable results in our reporting and communication. So this next slide just shows a few tangible examples of how we've communicated our impact, both internally and externally, whether it be through a data dashboard, presentations, social media, and even large-scale reports such as our annual sustainability report. So now let's get back to the pop-up questions Sadie shared at the beginning of our presentation to bring our conversation sort of full circle. These are the sorts of questions that Sadie and I get asked on a regular basis. And when you have the right data, you can get ahead of these questions. So let's quickly go through each one to see what sort of answers you'd be able to reply with, assuming that you've prepared with the data on those 4 KPIs that we just reviewed. So for this, we're going to use some real answers from the work at the PepsiCo Foundation. The first question is, which intervention strategies will best deliver on our goals? So one of the partnerships that we are tracking is WaterAid. So our partnership in Nigeria will increase the availability of clean water for 43,000 people and rehabilitate dysfunctional public water and sanitation facilities. And to complement enhanced WASH access, WaterAid will target women and girls in healthcare centers and schools with behavior change campaigns focused on basic hygiene practices. So this example reflects a clear alignment not only to our focus area, but also to our priority cohorts as well as region. So with all the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is a question many programs are being asked right now. For our answer, we looked specifically at PepsiCo's community college program, the example we saw earlier in the presentation, where we're training 4,000 scholars in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. The next question is, we've spent millions on different charitable initiatives. How are we catalyzing beyond our own funding? As we mentioned earlier, the PepsiCo Foundation seeks out opportunities for foundational investment. And because of this, we're able to track how much catalytic investment has come from our initial investments. And in some cases, as much as $2 have been generated from other funders for every $1 we've invested originally. Another important question, can you trust the data that you're getting? Now, at PepsiCo, we have a pretty rigorous cross-functional data governance review process that we see outlined here that gives us confidence in the data that we use. And knowing the source of each of our nonprofit programs' results is absolutely key for us having this confidence in which data we do and do not use. And then finally, lastly, and maybe this is the most important question out of them all, is, are you really helping move the needle on the issues your company cares about? So from the example we used earlier on in the presentation, at PepsiCo, we've helped more than 68 million people gain safe water access on our way to reaching the 100 million people by 2030. And, because they just joined the foundation recently, I think this is honestly one of the reasons why I was so excited to join the PepsiCo Foundation team, because they are committed to moving that needle. So with that, I think we're finished our part, and I'll leave it to Sadie to comment on this slide.
Yeah, so we also are offering sort of an opportunity to answer some of your specific questions if we didn't get to them in our one-on-one impact measurement office hours. And this is the link to those here.
And I will jump in. There are a few questions that are flowing in, but our time is almost over. So I think the office hours that you are mentioning, very generous of you and a great time to dive into either the new questions or even in depth on some of the questions that we received previously. But I do want to ask one more that was in the box, because I think this is just really so important that so many of us struggle with. While making grants globally, some nonprofits at times are not equipped or large enough to be able to provide these data inputs. How can we make sure local causes can help us with impact measurement while not placing additional burden on them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we work with thousands of nonprofits, and those are global. And we've been able to, through best available data, and through asking just enough, so simple questions, to really be able to level the playing field for smaller nonprofits globally to communicate their impact while being very clear about the level of their measurement sophistication. And I think offering, selecting, and sharing a set of indicators that you'd like partners to measure really from the get-go is going to be important for communicating early on what you'd like those outcomes to be tracked towards, so that you're not just opening up a big comment box and saying what happened, which is probably the most terrifying thing that a new nonprofit or one that doesn't have the resources that a larger organization would have.
Yeah. And I also think that it's not necessarily more metrics are better. It's getting to those key metrics that we need, because sometimes we just get too many metrics and it's too much to handle. Sometimes it's too many. It's just not possible to manage. So just making sure, like what Sadie said at the beginning, is this the metric that we want that is going to reflect what we want to communicate, what we're hoping to achieve?
Yeah, and I think that was a great point to end on, Meredith. Quality is so critical. So thank you so much, Meredith and Sadie, and thank you so much to True Impact for sponsoring this today. It's been a terrific conversation. We know that we could, spend a lot more. There were a lot more questions. So again, the office hours that you had mentioned to learn more is www.trueimpact.com/office hours. So take advantage of that and be able to ask the good questions that you have. So be sure to check out the available resources slide that's available as part of the slide deck, because we link to a number of reports from the conference board. You can also sign up for a corporate citizenship and philanthropy newsletter and learn more about the various things, resources that we have within the conference board. And also I want to put a plug in for our annual Corporate Citizenship and Philanthropy Toolbox Conference, which is taking place virtually in November. If you're a member of the conference board, it is complimentary. If you are not a member, it's actually quite a good value. So there are a lot of good resources out there. Again, thanks so much, Meredith, Sadie, True Impact, for your work on this, and of course the PepsiCo Foundation. So we appreciate you being with us for this call. Good luck on this journey of measurement, as something we've been on together, and thank you. Have a good day.